Fear Not, Episode 41. Hi, I'm Billy Atwell, and I believe that consistently facing your fears is the only way to realize your truest self and to make those confident choices that will help you to obtain your deepest held hopes and dreams. I have faith that this podcast series will show you that you are not alone, that it will strengthen you and give you courage to face your fears, and that it will help you to permanently cross over into a life of living beyond your fears. Join me on this journey as we listen and learn from others as they share their experiences in facing and overcoming their own fears. Hello, everybody. Today, you and I are going to be joined by Bruce Van Horn. Welcome, Bruce. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Billy. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. I've been really looking forward to it, so I'm glad you're here today. Bruce is a best-selling author, speaker, thought leader, transformational life coach, marathon runner, and cancer conqueror. Respected for his insight, Bruce also hosts the Life is a Marathon podcast, which has listeners in over 195 countries around the world. Bruce is passionate about sharing his life experiences and respected insight to help people overcome their negative thinking and limiting beliefs and develop a winning mindset. Bruce, can you take a few minutes just to sort of fill in the gaps and maybe also give us a brief glimpse of your personal life?
Oh, yeah, sure. And that can take hours depending on where exactly you want to go with that. So yeah, the bio sums it up pretty well as to exactly what I'm doing now. The other piece that is a major, well, I guess it's diminishing in time as they get older, but I'm also a full-time single dad, meaning I have full custody of my two sons who just recently turned 20 and 14. So one is off to college already, but I still have a middle schooler at home, and they are they absolutely keep me busy too, and they are, really my number one responsibility as far as a leadership role and setting an example for them as well. And I didn't always do a really good job of that. I do a much better job of it now, I think, and I think if you were to ask them, they would say the same thing. But my early parenting years were not great simply because I wasn't great. I was miserable, as a matter of fact. So I'm 53 now. When I was 42, so 11 years ago, I was seriously driving around town looking at bridge overpasses, trying to figure out which one would be the most efficient to put me out of my misery, because I was just miserable, and I didn't really understand why. I had lots of reasons and lots of excuses and did a lot of finger pointing and blaming for all of my problems, but that ultimately wasn't it. But I had at least circumstantially been in a very difficult marriage. I had, I'm sort of an entrepreneur at heart, and had filed bankruptcy twice. At that point, I had experienced the death of our daughter, and I was just miserable. And I had told myself a story that went basically, my life sucks. It has sucked for a really, really long time. Therefore, it will continue to suck for the rest of my life. And so at that point, what's the point of even trying? And that's where I was. And through an interesting turn of events, which wound up being perfect and led me to where I am now, my older brother, in 2005, I live in Richmond, Virginia. He had come to run the Richmond Marathon. And after the marathon, he said, "Bruce, you should do this." And I said, "I should do what?" And he said, "You should run marathons." And I laughed at the boy. I thought he was just out of his mind, because I worked from home and didn't even like to drive 26 miles unless I was going on vacation, let alone run 26 miles. Everything I wanted was within a 5-mile drive of my house. So it at least challenged me to get out and start exercising, because I was woefully overweight and out of shape, and couldn't keep up with my boys, who at the time were 8 and 2. Um, you know, I was struggling to keep up with them. So I started working out. I joined a gym. I started walking on a treadmill, which slowly evolved to jogging, which slowly evolved to running. And the next thing I knew, about 6 months later, I was training for my first marathon. And it was during that training process that I had a series of epiphanies and really did some deep soul searching, a deep dive into who I am, and what I thought were all of my problems boiled down to I only had one problem. I had a Bruce problem. I had a thinking problem. And I was in full blown victim mode. But the thing that transformed my thoughts was literally in the middle of an August morning in 2006, prior to me even running my first marathon, I identified myself already as a marathon runner. It's who and what I had become. My body, I was no longer overweight or out of shape. I was out on an 18-mile run, and I had this sudden awareness that absolutely everything about having changed my life from being overweight and out of shape into an in shape person capable of running a marathon, 99% of that was mental. Only at 1% of it would have been physical, but it was all mental, making the decision to do something to change my life. And you can't subcontract marathon training, Billy. I don't know if you've ever tried, but you just can't do it. I could hire the kid down the street to cut my grass if I don't feel like cutting my grass, but I can't hire the kid down the street to do an 18-mile training run for me. So success or failure in becoming a marathon runner was 100% my responsibility. And it occurred to me that my success or failure in any area of life was 100% my responsibility. And I needed to snap out of this victim mentality and blaming people, including God, for all of my problems. And I needed to go through the same sort of process to change my life by changing my thinking about life and the story that I was telling myself, and seeing myself as much more capable than I had convinced myself that I was. So there's just kind of a story that caught me up and at least moved me in the direction of who and what I am and what I do now.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that too. And also, I'm a runner, by the way, too. So I'm
Awesome.
fully on board with how it changes your mental perspective.
It really
Definitely.
does.
Bruce, with your book, Worry No More, you describe 4 steps on how to stop worrying and to start living. And I was hoping that you would discuss with us those steps a little bit and, maybe also start out with helping us to define what worry is so that we get a better understanding of what it is.
Sure. Worry is, and the way I wrote the book was I start with this premise that we are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, telling ourselves a story. And it's much more involved than the fact that, that we are writers, which we are, but because our minds are visual and we are sensory. So it's more than just telling ourselves a narrative. We literally are movie directors. And so I sort of cast the whole book in this idea that has to start with the premise that we are constantly writing the script, building the set, creating the scenery, creating the characters in the movie of our life. And we move our lives in that direction, constantly, evaluating our lives against the script that we have cast ourselves into and cast other people into. And so worry is basically creating a movie for yourself in which you suffer greatly and you wind up being the victim rather than being the victor. And so it's a story, it's a movie in which you are projecting a future that includes pain or loss or whatever experience it is, which is the exact opposite of what you actually want to experience. That's ultimately what worry is. It's a thought process in which you create a future in which you experience pain that you don't want to experience.
So, how can we not do that?
Write a new movie. um, and there are, so I go that way with it. And there are some really practical things that we do or that we can do. You have met them. I've actually said the words myself, but I give some examples of people that I have spoken with who are so caught up in this process of worry that they say, Bruce, I just can't help it. I can't stop thinking about this thing that I'm afraid is going to happen. And it's just not true, Billy. You can stop thinking about it. You're just choosing not to. You're exercising. One of the things that I mentioned in it is that no matter what it is that you do, you are always training for something. You are always exercising something to make it easier to continue doing that thing, like hitting the snooze button, for example. If you hit your snooze button this morning instead of getting up when the alarm goes off, guess what you're doing? You're training yourself to hit the snooze button tomorrow. And then it just becomes, how many people do you know who just never get up when the alarm goes off because they've trained themselves not to? So to say, I can't stop worrying, isn't actually true. You actually can, but you have to practice. You have to actually exert some effort in trying to stop thinking of things. So I give some examples in the book where I'll be on a coaching call with somebody and they'll say, well, I can't stop, one of the examples is I spoke with a young lady who had a child who was born with cerebral palsy, and she was pregnant, and she was so worried that the next baby would have the same types of issues. And that's a legitimate concern. I get that as a parent. We think about those things, but she was so caught up in it that she said she can't stop thinking about it. So I walked her through a little scenario. We basically did a guided meditation in which I asked her to just close her eyes and think 5 years out into the future, where her now 1-year-old is a 6-year-old, and she's in kindergarten, and she's out on a school field trip with all of the other kindergartners, and she's sitting on this park bench in a lovely park on a beautiful spring day. There are flowers blooming, and you can smell the scent of the flowers and the trees budding on the soft breeze. And there are ducks out swimming on the lake, and the children are all swinging and playing on the swing sets and playground equipment. And while her daughter might have some physical differences from the other kids, she's still laughing and playing, and the other children are including her in their games and gently swinging her on the swing set. And sitting right next to her in a baby carriage is her new child, who's perfectly healthy and is sound asleep with a pacifier in her mouth, and she's sitting there with all the other moms having a wonderful conversation. And so when I finished that, I asked the lady, I said, so were you there with me? Where could you, and she was like, oh my gosh, Bruce, yes, I could smell the flowers. I could feel the breeze. And I said, well, guess what you just did? You told yourself a different story. I helped you, but in your mind, you created a different movie for the outcome of your life, and you enjoyed that. So you can do this. It's just about choosing to. And the likelihood of the story that I just cast of that happening is just as likely, if not more likely, than the story that you've been telling yourself of rejection and pain and difficulty and being alienated from other parents with normal kids, etc. So that's really the main step, is to realize that we absolutely are in control of our thoughts. We may have relinquished control of our thoughts to other people or to the media, and so we just accept whatever we've been told, but it's just not true. You and you alone control your thoughts, and you have a responsibility to think thoughts that are beneficial to you rather than thinking thoughts that are harmful to you or keep you down. So that's really the first step that I walk people through, is you don't have to project the images of doom and gloom. In fact, you shouldn't. You can project the other images as well. And there, I go into a lot more detail. That the indications are that what we believe about the future directly impact the decisions we make and the actions that we take today. So, for example, if I'm all worried because it's now the 20th of the month and I don't have the money in the bank to make the house payment, or the example that I use in my book is I can't make rent next month, and I'm all worried about that, and I see myself not paying the landlord, and the landlord getting all upset, and starting the eviction processes. If I've just told myself a story in which that's a foregone conclusion, guess what I'm not going to do today other than sit on the couch and worry about that? I'm not going to get off the couch, and I'm not going to go try to find some extra income or go sell some things. I'm not going to take the action necessary to bring in the additional income if I'm absolutely convinced that I'm not going to have the money at the end of the month. However, if I tell myself a story in which I see myself writing the check, handing it to the landlord, knowing that it's good, but the reality is today I don't have that money, but if I see myself doing it and I feel how good that's going to feel in 2 weeks to be able to pay my rent, then now I'm motivated to get off the couch and go do something about it to bring into reality that which I already see myself doing. Because that's actually what we wind up doing. We create our own realities by the actions that we take right now based on the vision that we have for our future. So that, go ahead, interrupt me.
I was going to say, because I've heard this a lot, and I've done my own reading. I'm really curious as to why you think people don't take those actions. I mean, from a Christian scriptural point of view, we've had it for like 2,000 years. There's been contemporary writers who write about this concept of choice. And why don't you think that we have more success than we do?
And if I can answer that question, then I don't have to work ever again. and everybody else will just get it, and it will fix the issues. A lot of it has to do with the environment that we continue to hang out with. Maybe we had negative friends, maybe we had negative parents. We certainly are bombarded with negative news media who tell us that the world is coming to an end and this politician is going to destroy our country, or this decision is going to ruin the economy. And so there's just this foreseeing of doom and gloom, and it's somehow or another there seems to be this I think what's inherent in it is that as long as the story is of doom and gloom, and I was certainly caught up in this. There's pain and misery, but that pain and misery was caused by other people. Then it's not my fault, and I can claim that I'm a victim, and I can ask people to feel sorry for me because I can tell my woe is me story, and everybody goes, "Oh, you poor thing." And guess what happens when people say, "Oh, you poor thing"? Well, that feels good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a payoff to being negative. There's a payoff to being a victim because it feels good when people say, "Oh, Bruce, you poor thing. How do you go through that?" And I go, "Oh, I don't know. It's just really hard, but thank you." But so there's that emotional payoff. Whereas if I claim 100% responsibility for my own life, I'm not claiming 100% responsibility for the government or for other people. It's just me. But if I know at the end of the day, I am responsible for whether or not my boys eat today. And I'm responsible for whether or not the mortgage gets paid and the grass gets cut. And I see myself as being capable and competent to do those things. Then I'm motivated to get out and do it. Okay? But I have to take responsibility for who I am, for where my life is, regardless of external circumstances. I at least have to take responsibility for how I feel about it or the story that I tell about those things. And so I think it's easier to be the victim than it is to be master and commander of your own destiny, if you will. It requires work. It requires us to be grown-ups is really what it does. So the next step we could talk about is there are some physical things that you can do while you are in the midst of worrying. If you find yourself, in a negative thought pattern, some of it can actually be physical. It might be that you might have some kind of chemical imbalance, and you might need to go see your doctor, and there might be some medications that you can take to balance out certain, hormonal or serotonin levels within your brain. But as marathon runners or runners in general, it feels good to move our bodies, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
So running, I think, not only shifted my mindset, but I probably was chemically depressed prior to that. And so the action of getting out and moving my body increased the serotonin production in my body. It increased my endorphin levels, and those things feel good. Running and exercise is the most underused antidepressant that there is, because you just feel good. So you can actually get out. So one of the things that I say is that fear and worry loves isolation and darkness. And so when we're scared, when we're worried about something, we tend to shut down. We tend to stay in our own cocoons. We might have to go to work every day, but we're not as interactive with others. We don't talk to people about our problems. We tend to actually avoid sunlight. So we stay in our homes. But if you will recognize that about yourself and actually get out of your house or get out of your office building and go for a walk in the sunshine, it's amazing how much better you will feel when you come out of that. So there are some physical things that you can do. You can actually, when I wrote my book, I actually was not aware of the work of certain people who have studied this, but I talk about how what works really well for me is holding a victory pose. And the victory pose is simply standing up, shoulder length, feet spread shoulder length apart, with your arms up in the air. Imagine the referee at a football game doing the touchdown single. So if you will stand up and hold a victory pose, it just makes me feel better. But there's a lady named Amy Cuddy. She is a Harvard professor who has done the actual chemistry levels in your body to prove that holding a victory pose for 30 seconds changes your brain's chemistry. It increases endorphins. It actually increases testosterone. And so she talks about it in college classes, where if you're about to take an exam and you're a little stressed out about it, if right before you sit down for the exam, and if you're embarrassed, she says, go into the bathroom stall and just hold a victory pose for a minute. If you're about to go on a job interview and you're nervous about it, go into the bathroom stall and hold a victory pose. it will increase your serotonin, it will increase your testosterone levels, and decrease actually your cortisol levels, which are the hormones that make you feel bad and sad and gloomy. And so it literally reverses those, and it gives you more confidence. And so I write about that. Little things like holding a pencil between your teeth, not biting down on it really hard, but if you'll just put a pencil loosely between your teeth and kind of hold it there with your lips, it's using the very same muscles that you would have to use if you were smiling. And literally holding a pencil between your teeth gently for 2 or 3 minutes will put you in a better mood, because our brains and our bodies are directly wired together. If we're sad and depressed about something, our shoulders naturally drop. We kind of cross our arms over our chest and we close ourselves off and we don't smile. However, if you force yourself to smile and you force yourself to open a body position so that your arms are hanging naturally by your side or you're open, then it changes the chemistry inside your brain and can actually help you. So there are some physical things that you can do to assist you in moving in the direction of not worrying. So it's just about being aware of those things. So getting outside, going for a walk, getting sunshine on your face and skin, moving your body are some great ways that you can actually turn worry, fear, and anxiety around.
Bruce, what parting advice would you like to give us today?
The thing that I want everybody to know is that no matter what it is that you're worried about, no matter what it is that you're stressed about, I want you to look back through your life as far as you can possibly look back. And I want you to realize that you have succeeded in life so much more than you have failed. The problem is you've focused on the failures to the point where you have completely forgotten your victories. You have so many victories. Even if you go way back to your childhood, unless you have had something, physically wrong with you, you learned how to walk. Okay? That's a huge victory, right? Because you were persistent. You stayed at it. I said something out on Twitter and Instagram recently, and we use this phrase so much now that oh well, if I was meant to be successful, then it would have happened by now. And so we tend to say, well, I guess it's just not meant to be. Well, you know what? A toddler learning to walk after the third time he falls down doesn't say, well, the whole walking thing, I guess it's just not meant to be. No, the toddler keeps going. Just because you failed 3 times doesn't mean that you give up. And if you look back over your life and you see all of the huge accomplishments, you learned how to walk, you learned how to do algebra, maybe not great, but you learned how to do it. You got through certain levels of schooling. You studied materials. You passed tests. You got jobs offered to you. You had a great relationship at some point. If those things have happened in the past, that's ample evidence that they can continue to happen to you in the future. So you have more gifts and strengths and abilities. You have had more victories, successes in your life than you have had failures. And we will continue to there's a natural law of expansion that says what you focus on expands. What you focus on, you will get more of. So let's focus on the good things. Let's focus on the capabilities. And let's focus on the good things. One of the things that I do every single night that has been foundational for me and has been, I don't know, largely responsible for so much of the improvement in my life is before I go to bed, I recall my day and I actually write down in a journal all of the wins that I can think of. I call it my victory log. And so I don't spend hours journaling. I just make notes that say, you know what? I went to the grocery store and the teenager who was running the cashier, she and I had a lovely conversation. I want more of that in my life. My boys came home with a good report card. I want more of that in my life. I had a great client meeting today. I wasn't feeling well this morning, but now I'm feeling better. I'm excited about that. So anything that went well, anything that I'm proud of, basically anything that I want more of in my life, including I just smiled at a stranger on the street and he smiled back at me. I want more of that in my life. I write those things down, just a little statement of what it was. And I go to bed at night thinking about those things so that when I wake up in the morning, I'm usually in a pretty good mood because I know that I went to bed thinking about my victories. So there's no reason that today won't also be filled with more and more victories. It's how we turn it around.
Bruce, if someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I made it really easy. I bought a domain, brucevanhorn.com. That's the best way. I'm all over social media. I've been blessed with almost 500,000 Twitter followers who engage with me on a regular basis. But the easiest way is to just go to brucevanhorn.com, and all the links to my social media is there. The links to my Life as a Marathon podcast is there. And that's really the hub of all of the activity. There are links to where people can buy the books. So that's the easiest way, is at brucevanhorn.com.
Bruce, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. And
Sure, Billy, I appreciate it.
yeah, your generosity with your time and your knowledge has just been amazing. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you cannot achieve everything, but you do have the God-given ability to achieve anything. So stay focused, out of fear, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, be well and peaceful. For more information on today's episode and guest, or for resources that will assist you in overcoming your fears, visit livingbeyondyourfears.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, where 3 times a week we move to a life beyond our fears.